Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to give you guys 5 players that I believe Scott Robinson could select for the All Blacks when he takes charge in 2024. Again, the only requirement I've given myself is that these players have to be, young, kind of on the youth side of things, just because, we're thinking towards the future. And with Robinson in charge, he'll want to make some, changes and think more in terms of the future. So that's kind of the approach I've taken onto this, taken into this as well. Again, before we get into this, make sure to like the video, guys. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already, and make sure to comment below to let me know your 5 players that you think Scott Robinson could select going into 2024 and beyond. But besides that, let's get straight into this. So as you can see right here, this is the first player I have in mind, which is Peninau. He's the only forward I've actually selected out of the 5, surprisingly. Again, the only reason for this, by the way, is just because there's a lot of players who are on the youth side of things, but I just think there's so much cover. Like when you're thinking of sevens, there's like Peter Lackey, I think is in a good season. There's Tom Christie. But again, those 2 players have to compete against the likes of Papa Lee for that spot, who I think is really the apprentice, or really the successor, when Sam Cane eventually kind of steps down and kind of moves on from the All Blacks squad. But so that's a pretty tough decision there in terms of the sevens. And then again, when you're looking at the 8s, there's the likes of Cullen Grace, but again, he's very injury prone, I think. There's the likes of Hoskins Tutu, who can kind of come back into things. So he's an interesting prospect. But I'd definitely like to see what he can do, obviously, this year, as he did, miss out for the Rep World Cup squad. But there's probably one more player. Oh yeah, Christian Leo Willie, another player who really stood out for the Crusaders. When Robinson was in charge. So those are probably the 3 I'd say in terms of kind of up-and-coming players in terms of the 8 position. But really, the one that the All Blacks really have to take into consideration here is the 6th position. And again, the reason because of this is because of Shannon Brazell now leaving off to Japan. And I think Sami Peninau is the perfect replacement for him. He's a big man. He had a very consistent season for the Chiefs. He only just, unfortunately, missed out in terms of that All Black squad for the Rep World Cup. And again, he's actually a great player. But again, he hasn't had enough minutes in the All Black squad to kind of be regarded as, kind of a player in contention for that starting spot. And yes, he did get selected, but I don't think he's only played 1 game, if I'm not mistaken, or even just he's only had a few minutes. So it's one of those players where he just hasn't been in the conversation at the moment, and I'd like to see him more going forward when Razor kind of comes in charge. And he's a player I just think he's so good in terms of his tackling as well, and he's another player you can kind of add towards that line-out drive in terms of like what they do in terms of their plays there. So yeah, I think Sami Peninau is just a player I really look at as kind of like a hard man, but something which the All Blacks really need in terms of that 6. And again, he kind of reminds me of kind of what the All Blacks need in terms of a Kano. So yeah, I think Sami Peninau is definitely a player I look at in terms of number 6 spots. And yeah, that's the kind of the first player I keep an eye out for going forward to 2024. But the next player I have in mind, now going on to the backs, is Folau Fakatava here. Again, he's a scrum half, and there's a lot of competition in this position because Roygaard stepped up heavily, I'd say, throughout the Rep World Cup. Really, made a name for himself, I'd say, in that tournament. And in my opinion, I believe he's now going to become the starter with, obviously, Aaron Smith now leaving the All Blacks and going off to Japan. But I think Roygaard is definitely the player. I think he's just going to be the starter. But I think Folau Fakatava is the one to keep an eye out for because he, obviously he was very unfortunate to, have a very long-lasting injury for a lot of the time. And he actually chose not to do a bit of surgery. I believe it was on his knee, if I'm not mistaken. But again, I think he'll be fully fit going into the Super Rugby season for next year. And he's a player I really like watching. And again, the other great thing about him is that he doesn't have to compete against Aaron Smith as well at the Highlanders. So he's really going to be kind of the player that kind of creates all the plays in terms of what they do in that back line. So he's a player I really like, and he's always really good off the bench, actually, going off, seeing that combination with Aaron Smith. So he has a lot of kind of experience in that position. So I think a combination of Roygaard as the starter, but Folau Fakatava off the bench, that's a nasty combo. And and Folau Fakatava can even start at times. So it's one of those where I can really see a balance between those 2. But Folau Fakatava is just a player I really enjoy just because he's really good at his passing. He's really good in that aspect. Again, he's not really like a try scorer like Roygaard, but I just think that having a player like Fakatava as your backup is it's pretty good to have because again you have to remember that Razor when going back towards his time at the Crusaders, he really didn't have a world-class 9. He had the likes of Bryn Hall, Mitchell Drummond, he had Will Hines, of course, but Willie Hines, but he just never really had a world class 9. And I think players like Roygaard as the number 9, but Folau Fakatava, I just think, man, that would be one heck of a duo there in terms of that position. But Folau Fakatava, I definitely say is the second player keep a tab on, because he's, in my opinion, going to have a very good season for the Highlanders. But anyway, moving on then towards the third player of this selection here. I've gone with a 10, and that's Fergus Burke. Again, another player who really had a breakout season, say last year in Super Up B, this year I mean. But he's one of those players who just really stood out for the Crusaders, and again, that was really due to Richard Mo'unga kind of being out for the start of the season. And again, he kind of came into it, kind of got a lot of those minutes, and just demonstrated that he has the ability to play that 10 position for the future, and kind of I guess carry on that role. Will take that place really, with Mo'unga now obviously going to Japan as well. So it's another player where he's gonna have a lot of minutes under his belt, similar towards Fakatava. He's one that I think is going to have a really good season for the Crusaders. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there, because I believe, what is it? Is it Rob Penny, if I'm not mistaken, who's the coach now there? So it's going to be very fascinating to see how it's going to be used under Penny. But no matter what, I'm really fascinated to see what Fergus Burke can do, because he's an electric player. Like he's really good in terms of his playmaking, but he always finds the right pass as well. So yeah, he's a player I can definitely see making the All Blacks in the future. So yeah, in terms of that 10 position as well, you have to remember that Mo'unga is no longer in the consideration, because he's off for Japan. So he's kind of given his name. Well, you can just take his name off the list. And again, there is Mackenzie, of course, who will be the starter. But again, you're gonna have someone like Beauden Barrett, who again, it's not confirmed yet, but he's probably gonna come back into the side following his 1-year stint in Japan. So that will be kind of the second player you're gonna choose most likely as the 10. But that third option, I'd have someone there, and it's Fergus Burke is probably the player I would choose there. So yeah, I think he's just one player I really enjoyed watching last season in terms of Super Up B, and I think he can probably continue that going forward into the new year, and just kind of demonstrate once more why he should be kind of selected for the All Blacks. But anyway, moving on towards the next player right here, the fourth out of the 5, and yeah, it's another Crusader. I've gone with Dallas McLeod here, and he's a player who really run under the radar, I think, for a lot of people. And I think that's because this is what I recall, when the All Black squad was announced, actually, a lot of people were surprised to see him actually selected. Again, he didn't actually get any minutes to what I recall, but he's a player who really had, I mean this, like, he had a very consistent season. He had a lot of minutes under his belt. He was really, he was kind of not lucky in this sense, but he took his opportunity, actually, because I believe it was Havili who had injuries at the point. There was who else was there? There was who's the other center for the Crusaders? I'm going blank here. It's Havili and Enor, of course. Enor is the other player who had an injury. So just those two going out just opened up the spot for him to kind of just play a lot of minutes, and he really took advantage of it. And yeah, he was really good in terms of his getting a lot of tries, a lot of try assists as well. And again, he actually played a few times on the wing, so he's actually very versatile in the sense where he can actually play 12, 13, or 14. That's what we kind of saw him play throughout his time in the Crusaders throughout the last season. So it's a player he's very versatile, and I think that's something which Scott Robertson will appreciate, actually. So. And again, when you're thinking of the kind of the covers for the centers, I mean, yes, you're going to have Jordy Barrett and Reiko most likely will be the centers, I'd say, going into the next World Cup. They're going to be 30 years old going into that one. So I mean, you want to kind of maintain that consistency, and I think they're going to do that with ease. But again, you never know. There could be injuries that pop up as the months go by, and in the next few years, of course. So there's going to be opportunities for the players like. I think Dallas McLeod to kind of step in again. He's going to probably be partnered up with Havili. He'll probably be partnered up with Havili most likely, because Havili is someone who Scott Robertson definitely appreciates. So that'll be a nice combination, Havili and McLeod, actually, as the kind of 12-13 combo. But again, he's someone who's, like I said, is very versatile. So I definitely keep an eye out for him in terms of how well he does throughout the next season, really. Because if he does well, then I can definitely see him get selected once more. But again, in terms of the final player for this kind of concept here, I've gone with Zarn Sullivan, and yeah, he's a player who I really do appreciate. And I mean, most of you guys know I'm a Blues fan, and he's a player who, again, he's played most of his minutes as a 15. but a lot of people see him as kind of the next 10, and I can see why, because, you know, if you look at NPC, he actually plays a lot of his minutes as a 10 there, and again, you know, he's someone who's been, he's very versatile, where he can play 10 and 15, similar to actually Fergus, Burke, actually, you can play also 10 and 15 as well, but Zarn Sullivan, he just has something about him where first of all, his boot is like unbelievable. He's a left foot kicker, so that's something very useful to have in terms of kind of an asset, really. Because when you're thinking about the 15 spot there, what I think most people want to see, and what a lot of people believe what will happen, is that Will Jordan will kind of shift from that 14 spot down towards the 15, and then they'll kind of open up 2 spaces for wingers there. But in terms of the cover for Will Jordan, I honestly think Zarn Sullivan is going to be the cover for him. I think he's a player who can really step up. Again, with Bowden Barrett obviously going to Japan for 1 year, he's going to have a lot more minutes and a lot more opportunity, actually, to kind of express himself throughout Super Rugby. And again, there is another player in mind who's also the Blues, which is Stephen Perifetta, who, again, is another player who can step into that role if needed, because he can also play 10 and 15. But I don't know. I think just Zarn Sullivan has that X factor about him, and he brings something different. Whenever he plays, you know, when it's for the Blues, or when, you know, we saw kind of what he did against Ireland when he represented the Maori All Blacks. I mean, he was pretty good in a few of those games. Again, he didn't play all 3 of them, but I think there was like 2 games he played, if I'm not mistaken. He really stood out in both of them. So yeah, he's a player I really have in mind. I think the All Blacks will have in mind, because again, he's only 23 years old, by the way. So it's really, you know, he's really young still, and he has a lot of potential. And he's going to get a lot more minutes under his belt. And that's really the main thing I'm hoping he does get. And again, if he does get that, then I can definitely see him being in the conversation for the All Blacks going into 2024. But again, I mean, look, when you look at all these players I've selected, I mean, you have Peninau, who's 24 years old. You have Folau Fakatava, who I believe is 23, 24, somewhere around there, even younger probably. And then you have Fergus Burke, who I believe is 23. You have McLeod, who is 24. Zarn Sullivan, who's 23. So it's a very youth kind of vibe I'm kind of getting from this in terms of the players I've selected. But in all honesty, I had to do that because I think that's what Razor is going to look out for in terms of the future, in terms of the All Blacks. And yeah, I just think there's a lot of players who are up in the conversation who I haven't named, of course. You know, there's older players I could have mentioned. You know, there's Cullen Grace, of course, a great player, but again, he's very injury prone at times. So we'll have to see if he can kind of get more minutes on the board. If he's consistent, I can definitely see him in the conversation. There's older players. I mean, there's Levi Mua, who's obviously now going to represent the Crusaders, but he's 29 years old, so I'm not sure what's going to happen there. Again, we can see a similar situation to what we saw with RTS, with Tuasa, where they go with a kind of an older player, just try him out to see if it works or not. I don't know if it'll work, but we'll see. Who else is there? I mean, in terms of the locks, I can definitely see Patrick Tripolotto kind of come back into the conversation, but again, those are more older players, so that's kind of what I didn't want to think of that in that way. With the thing more young and youth, and that's what Razor want to kind of bring towards this All Black side when he takes charge into 2024. But anyway, that's kind of it with the video, guys. Let me know obviously what you guys think in terms of the players I've selected. Make sure to like the video, guys. Subscribe to our channel, and definitely leave a comment below to let me know your players that you would select. And let me know if you guys agree, disagree with me. I really want to know. But yeah, besides that, guys, I'll see you guys next time.